All right, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. Well, it's the first of the year, so we got through all of 2024, and that means I need to cover the top films of the past year, which I've already covered on my website with movieswithmark.com, but I'll go over the top 10 on this stream as well. But in addition to that, I'm also going to be covering the films that came out on Christmas this year. So that includes A Complete Unknown, the new Bob Dylan film from James Mangold, starring Timothy Chalamet. I'll also cover The Fire Inside, which was about the T-Rex, one of the first women boxers in the Olympics. And I'll also be covering Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, the latest Wallace and Gromit stop-motion film from Aardman Animation. So, if you'd like to check out written reviews of everything that I'm going to... Well, most of the written reviews I have. You can find those on my website at movieswithmark.com. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest movies, including, some... There are a few more that are coming up in January that I have seen already. That I will eventually get to cover. Just wanted to cover the Christmas ones today. But if you want to stay up to date on the good films that are going to be coming out in January, which is mostly the holdovers from the last year, be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep up to date on the latest films. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Let's get straight into the Christmas films that we missed over Christmas time here. So let's see. Let me get my notes up here. Okay, I'll have those on the side here. Get some water. Okay. Let me get the notes right here. Okay. And here we go with A Complete Unknown in 3, 2, 1. So, A Complete Unknown is a new film from James Mangold that focuses on Bob Dylan's rise to fame in the 1960s. Now, James Mangold, with his other film, like Walk the Line. Walk the Line was another one of his films, a musical biopic that covered a broad range of Johnny Cash. And I think what sets, because there's going to be an easy comparison here if you're comparing that to A Complete Unknown with Bob Dylan, but Mangold actually makes the smart call of focusing on a specific part of Bob Dylan's life in that film, by just focusing on specifically the 1960s and what formed Dylan's initial rise to fame, and also his desire for what he wanted out of his fame. And it does have that a lot of people try to relate this film to Walk the Line, but I actually think it has a little bit more in common with Ford v Ferrari, another film by Mangold. And I think the reason for that is that that film was it focused a lot more on the tactile performances. It just focuses on the craft and how alluring that is. And that's a little bit of a gamble with this type of film, because when you're talking about musical performances, it has to have good casting and good direction where you're mesmerized by the performances and you can't look away from it. And thankfully, the film does have a very good performance by Timothy Chalamet playing Bob Dylan, and I love how he never plays up Bob Dylan too much. He seems very much like that type of famous figure where you could slip into caricature with how you try to get the voice just right. And I think Chalamet just has this very easygoing presence to him that you do need with Bob Dylan, and embodying that, I think it's more important for establishing the character as opposed to just matching the exact mannerisms. Because once I think Chalamet had the tone down of this character, it's great to see him perform in all these sequences. When you first see him start to perform in front of Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton, with fantastic performance, and he's sitting next to Woody Guthrie in his hospital bed, played by Scoot McNairy, which for a performance here where he doesn't really say much of anything is still pretty damn good. Just watching Chalamet just kind of mosey into this room and just kind of almost kind of like shyly break out his guitar and then just start, plucking away and singing with like his folk rock to just, mesmerize, Pete and Woody here. It really does like transfix you, and like Mangold has enough faith to let these scenes play out enough where like he's not like constantly dicing it up and editing it. There's a lot of shots that just hold on Chalamet's performance here of just playing and singing and just embodying everything that made so many of those iconic songs so great to hear. And yeah, you do share in that kind of like mesmerization by Pete Seeger when he listens to Bob Dylan for the first time, and he's like, wow, there's really something here, and I need to sign this kid on. And I think like that's probably like the most crucial scene in the film, because unless you believe in that, unless you can see like the same thing that Pete Seeger does, like you're not going to be along with the ride for where Bob Dylan goes here. And another key factor in that too is just Edward Norton's performance, because Norton it is just like it felt like he was born to play this role. Like and I kind of, this is gonna sound weird, but I kind of got a little bit of a vibe from like is Death to Smoochie, kind of like gentle demeanor here. I'm not saying it's exactly reflective. I'm just saying that kind of adds to like making this character be like this believable figure within like the folk rock scene of like the 1960s. And the other thing too is like just like the supporting performances, like Edward Norton was great here, but also Elle Fanny as Sylvie Russo, who's technically Susie, Bob Dylan's girlfriend. She does a great job playing like this woman struggling to get into Dylan's world. Like she loves him, but it always feels like she can never quite understand his drive. And I think that's almost because like Dylan kind of puts up like these creative barriers around him where he doesn't want to be so easily defined, which I mean, you can understand why, because like, there's scenes where like he doesn't want to just play the same songs over and over. He wants to expand, he wants to try out new stuff, he wants to try out electronics in his work, all to, the chagrin of both like the people who supported him and the audience who has come to recognize him. So he just like, he basically just doesn't want to be a jukebox. He wants to define himself, and he wants to keep growing as an artist, which is an understandable drive for that type of character. But it makes him such a fascinating character, and one that's like almost like frustrating for Sylvie to understand here. And you would think that Joan Baez, who's played by Monica Barbaro, and you would think that she would understand a little bit more of him, because she's also she's also a singer, and she plays alongside Bob Dylan. So you think that they'd have like a deeper connection, but even then, Joan is still also kind of struggling to understand Bob. And I think it's also part of like Bob's frustration with not being so pinned down within his work, where he just wants to grow, and within like an industry where you kind of have to do that, otherwise you die out. And not to mention, there's everything going on within the 1960s with like the political revolution. That was very much, it was fueled by Bob Dylan's music, and it was what fueled Bob Dylan to keep progressing. So it almost feels like Bob Dylan's greater connection here was more within like the historical context of the time, and just looking at what is important and what needs to be stressed upon within just music and art in general, that I think it makes him so much more fascinating here. And like I said, you do get a lot of scenes where it's just him playing, and you do get like a lot of other great supporting cast members here. Like another great one worth mentioning is Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash, who it feels like that like Cash and Dylan kind of like vibe in general, like they see eye to eye. Like Johnny Cash can recognize kind of what Bob Dylan's doing here, but also Johnny also kind of represents like a little bit of a caution for the route that he could go down as well. So I love that connection. And again, Holbrook's performance here just kind of like moseys onto the scene. He doesn't try to make like a big flashy character out of Johnny Cash for the few scenes that he has in this film. He's just kind of like there, and he becomes an influence on Dylan, and he just kind of moseys out of the film just as easily as Bob Dylan does. And just like it's great just to like watch all these performances, because you really do get transfixed on them. That I think it does warrant the film almost kind of like somewhat sidestepping a lot of like the political issues of the era. Like they are brought up, they are addressed with like, you know, like the civil rights movement, and you know, the problems within, you know, geopolitics at the time, and like the anger and the fury in the streets, and like the desire for something to change, and something, recognizing that basically the times are changing. I think it helps just to focus on Dylan's perspective of everything that happened within this decade, but then also how it fueled his own creative energy, which led to like some relationships disintegrating, but also a lot of other people recognizing his genius for being a little bit more rebellious out of a time where music really did need to be rebellious, and it did need to keep going forward to inspire revolution. So like I kind of went back and forth on this film like a little bit, because like, yeah, again, I would kind of like to see a little bit more of like the era explored, like just enough. Like we do get like we don't just see like Bob Dylan during performances, we also get to see him behind the scenes, and how he interacts with people, and how he's just, even like fearful of like of people loving him, because he feels like that's gonna pin him down. So we do get to focus on a few different angles of Bob Dylan, but it's mostly on his struggle to like be more creative within this industry. And again, a lot of that is very much dependent on the performances, and they work. The musical sequences work, and it's edited perfectly, where it doesn't feel like, we spend too much time on the concerts, or we're cutting away back and forth as though we're trying to like, cover up everything, like cover up like if there was a bad performance here. There really wasn't. Like there was rarely a moment where I was just like, where I wasn't just, in the groove with this, and just digging on these characters, embodying these famous actors, and not feel like they're just putting on caricature. It really does feel like they're trying to tap in to that creative energy of the era and everything that defined it. So for keeping the film in that kind of box, like, sure, I would like to see it expanded, but I think that's kind of like the sign of a good film, is that you want to see more of it. Because honestly, I would like to see what happens at the end of this film as Bob Dylan's career keeps going on. Just if only just to see what Timothy would do more with this role, and how Mangold would frame the rest of his career. Not saying it would be good. I'm just saying it enticed me. I would like to see a little bit more of that. But for the box that Mangold makes for this film, I think it's very effective. It very much engrossed me, and I loved the musical performances of everyone involved here. So A Complete Unknown is still playing in theaters since this Christmas. Welcome Hannibal Grimm, Viva la Resistance. Wonderful way to bring in the new year. All right, 2K. Let's get to the next film here. The Fire Inside. Okay. Let me get the notes up here. All right, and here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So, The Fire Inside is a sports drama, a true story, about Clarissa T-Rex Shields, who is the first woman to train and win at the 2012 Summer Olympics. Now, I've never been that much for sports biopics. Like I saw one earlier this year called Unstoppable, that, like it was trying, and I dug some of the performances, but just the overall framework, it felt like a typical sports biopic that didn't really engage me as much as I thought it would, and I just struggled to appreciate the performances. And I bring that up only because I want to stress that I really dug the fire inside, and I wasn't expecting to. I went into this film expecting just like, a typical sports biopic to just go through the motions. We see her struggle, we see her training, and then we see her get up to the Olympics, and then, she battles for the title, and then she wins, and the film ends triumphantly, and then we get the post-credit scene and all that. But what I love so much about this particular film, which it's directed by Rachel Morrison in her directorial debut, but the screenplay is by Barry Jenkins, of Moonlight fame, and I think they both of their talents, like they have worked together before, but here they do a great job of staging a sports biopic that you care about, and the primary reason for that is that the whole training and winning at the Olympics, that's only half the movie. The other half focuses on everything that comes after that, which is like the aftermath and the realization that no, there is some, corruption and, just greed that goes on that is holding women back from sports, and that has to be addressed, which it was such a breath of fresh air, because so many times I see these sports biopics of everyone who just goes through the motions and they struggle through all these the familiar hurdles that come up in every single film, and they're rarely addressed. They're always just, okay, I just need to clear the hurdle. I'm not questioning why it's there. This is a film that does question why it's there and why it has to be that way, and it was just so refreshing to have that in a film. But the other thing that really helps it too is that you do have great performances here. So playing Clarissa Shields is Ryan Destiny, and she is fantastic in this role, like in both the first half and the second half. But if I'm being honest here, she does shine a lot more in the second half, because the first half is all about the training and just, like the struggle, like everything about pushing herself. And that's really good. Like her physical performance and just her drive and motivation, it's all there. It's a good performance. But then you get to the second half where, she comes back home and she's struggling for money, and just like she realized that even though you did make it in the Olympics, there's still problems in the world, and there's still problems with your career that need to be addressed. Otherwise, you're just gonna live in, accept like the mere pennies you're getting thrown, and just like that level of distrust and that weariness that she experiences in that second act is just brutal and gut wrenching, and you feel for her so much, and just her performance is great there. But also, another fantastic performance here is Brian Tyree Henry as her coach of Jason Crutchfield, and again he really goes out of his way to embody this performance well. Like, and it feels like this would be like a fairly easy role. You could just you get in there and you just you be that supportive coach. You have the scenes where you scream for them in the arena, and when you have that heart to heart with them, when training is tough, and he does all that. But he does it with like this very like relatable level of understanding, and this level of like frustration where he wants to do more and struggles to do more, but realizes there are limitations there. He's never just seen as like that golden mentor who, like, everything, like all of his advice works and he's right all the time, and he never finds himself just, on edge or just, struggling like to connect with Clarissa. He's always there and present, and he has relatable frustrations that he would that he shares like with the same environment as Clarissa. And just like the two of them play off each other well, where anytime they were together, it was great to see them. And then even in like the Olympic scenes where like she's training and boxing, and Jason just has to be held back because he's not allowed to go that much further, which is like another, hurdle of, her career that you do start to question. It's like, well, wait, Jason was, her coach, he got her through everything. Why can't he be there as well? So I find the film so fascinating on that note, because yes, it is exciting to watch, Clarissa rise up from the ranks, and, like they set up her rival in the Olympics that she has to beat, and, she focuses on her training, and she has her down moments and her up moments, and we get all those typical scenes that you would expect from this type of a sports biopic. But then addressing the ugly truth of the aftermath just is such a sobering moment, and just like great drama, and just it was that moment that just pulled me back in. I was just like, about a quarter way through the film, I was like, this is actually really good. Like, I like the way it's edited. The performances are good. This is a pretty good sports drama. I think I might like this film. And then I got to that second half, like after the triumphant Olympic scenario, and then addressing everything that came afterwards just made me love the film even more. So I say this as someone who has never really dug sports biopics all that much. The Fire Inside is one that really hooked me because of the fantastic performances by Ryan Destiny, by Brian Tyree Henry, the fantastic directorial debut by Rachel Morrison, and another fantastic screenplay by Barry Jenkins. What can I say? I really loved The Fire Inside. So Fire Inside, it is still playing in theaters right now, and I believe it will be coming on Amazon Prime soon here. I think it will be coming sometime like mid-January, I think. Read some of the chat here. Handle Graham, how goes film, brother? It was a great year. It was great catching up. I struggled to finish all the screeners, but I think I got through all of them. See another one from Hannibal Grimm. I was hoping this was as good of a watch as it looks. It is, and it did surprise me. I thought for sure The Fire Inside was just going to be another passable sports biopic like Unstoppable, which I think is also coming out from from Prime Video. But this is the one to watch, and I think I need like to stress that title too, because. Like, there's two sports biopics. I think Unstoppable is on Prime Video right now. Don't get it confused with The Fire Inside. The Fire Inside is that's the Barry Jenkins written one with Brian Tyree Henry and fantastic performances. I loved it. All right. So let's get to our third film here. And this will kind of be an easy one. Little bit of an easy one. Okay. Because, I mean, how could you go wrong with Wallace and Gromit? Did you get to see Heavier Trip? I did not. But I've been hearing everyone say I need to... I actually did... I do remember Heavy Trip. The cute little... was it a... I'm trying to think of the right term. Like the... It's not quite death metal, but it was like a Swedish film. I remember it being very, very cute and like with a lot of like dry humor for like this death metal band, and I really liked it. So I was looking forward to Heavier Trip. I have not seen it yet, but I have heard from people who are big fans of Heavy Trip that Heavier Trip is just as good. So I am looking forward to it. Heavy Trip was a cute film. So I'd very much like to see these characters again. I'm hoping it's good, because I actually really dug the first film. Is it good? The first one is on. I got excited there for a minute. You said, yeah, I thought you said like the sequel's on YouTube with ads, but no, it's the first one. Finnish death metal. That's what it is. Yeah, I remember it's been a while since I've seen that film, but I really dug that little adventure they had, the little dry humor they had with how they state everything very matter-of-factly with how they like set up their death metal band. It's great. It's not... Oh, okay. It's for rent right now. Okay. I might rent it just because I really dug that film. So yeah, I will definitely put that on my watch list because I love the first film. All right. Well, let me clear my throat here and get to Heavier Trip. Not Heavier Trip. I want to. I will get to it. But we're going to cover Wallace and Gromit here. All right, here we go with Wallace and Gromit in 3, 2, 1. So, Wallace... and I've already screwed it up. One more time from the top. All right, 3, 2, 1. So, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, is actually a Wallace and Gromit sequel to The Wrong Trousers, which features the return of the villain Feathers McGraw. And, the Wallace and Gromit films, if you're kind of like the short films too, these films are almost kind of like critic-proof because you can't really judge them in terms of like a story because there isn't much of them. It's mostly just a fun little scenario, and then you just kind of judge it by how great like the slapstick and the physical gags are, and all the wondrous stop motion animation is that's assembled around it. Which actually, like, it's much easier to watch that type of film as opposed to, you know, the Aardman Animation's other films, like, you know, like Chicken Run, where I did start thinking a little bit more about the story. You know, Wallace and Gromit films are always just such a delight here. So you almost kind of got to grade like a Wallace and Gromit film differently from other Aardman Animations, and you kind of got to look at it based on, you know, how many great gags there are and how many times you smiled and you just appreciated the, you know, the funny little bits between this comical duo. And for the most part, I actually really dug it. I love like the little creativity they had here and there. I love the weird technology that Wallace uses. And that's like the best way I can describe the film. It's like, it's not as great as I consider the Were-Rabbit movie probably my favorite of Wallace and Gromit, just because it feels like it has a lot of creativity oozing through it, and it feels like it's trying to be a monster film, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, Vengeance Most Foul is very much like The Wrong Trousers in the fact that it features Wallace, once more he's voiced here by Ben Whitehead, who he has devised a new robot that he wants to help out with Gromit in his gardening. So he develops this little robot called the Norbot, which is a gnome that he calls a smart gnome in a very kind of cute way. And it's basically a gnome that does all of the garden work. And of course, Gromit is a little bit angered by this because, you know, it automates, you know, something that he enjoys doing. But since Gromit can't communicate with Wallace in that way, he kind of struggles to make that point known. But I do love the fact how, even though Wallace has kind of like does screw up stuff for Gromit, like, you can tell that he does very much care about him. So that by the time the film does get to that, you know, emotional resolve between the two of them, it is sweet. And you do expect it, but it is still, you know, charming to see on screen. But of course, you know, Feathers McGraw is the villain in this, so once he, you know, starts learning about the Norbot and how Wallace has been using it all around town, he devises a way to basically hack the Norbot to do his bidding, and ends up making this whole army of these robots to enact his revenge and steal a jewel. You know, typical criminal stuff for the silent villain here. And yeah, it is. And I will answer the base question. Yes, it is cute. It does have a lot of great physical comedy here and there. It is clever. I do mean, like, it's clever in like every way it could be. Like, at one point, Feathers McGraw is hacking into Wallace's computer, and I love the fact how Wallace has like a fairly easy password to decipher that even when like Feathers McGraw figures it out, like, he gets into Wallace's computer and this little voice comes up with Wallace saying like, hey, you're inside my computer. How about that? Just wonderful, absurd little details like that. And it never feels like it's trying too hard for a laugh here. And that also goes for a lot of the supporting characters here, which are also a bit endearing. Like, one person who is investigating Wallace being accused of crimes because of his Norbots is a police officer called PC Mukherjee, who's voiced by Lauren Patel, and she's very plucky. You know, she's looked down upon by her her superior of Chief Inspector Albert McIntosh, played by Peter Kay, who just, you know, he's a very like stuffy bureaucrat, but, you know, PC, she just kind of like, you know, takes it, you know, she takes it upon herself to try to solve these cases best she can, even though she doesn't really have much help. So she's very much an endearing character, and there's rarely a moment where you feel like anyone here is being too cynical or, you know, being too vindictive, aside from Feathers McGraw. And maybe the Norbots, even though the Norbots are mostly like they're programmed to be evil, and they're programmed to be smart, and they're just kind of more like innocent weapons being used in all this. The Norbots do have like a great dry delivery voiced by well, it's not quite dry, it's a little bit more eccentric, voiced by Reese Shearsmith, who does a pretty good job making these robots sound mechanical, but also having a little bit of an absurd personality. So there isn't too much to say on this film. Like, it does. I did worry a little bit that this was trying to be a movie based on one of the previous Wallace and Gromit that was a short that wasn't feature length, and this film was it's very much feature length. It's not like 2 hours, but it does run about the length of a typical film, and it doesn't outstay its welcome. That was like my biggest concern with this film, is that, you know, the antics and the slapstick and all the goofy little bits between, you know, the dog and his owner were just going to wear out their welcome, and thankfully they don't. And I think it helps that it just keeps building on itself. It never relies on one gimmick to keep it going. Like, it never relies on, like, the absurdity of the gnomes, because then it, you know, goes back to Feather McGraw. It never relies on Feather McGraw's evil deeds, because then it also is about, you know, proving Wallace's innocence. So you have a little bit of a fugitive angle going on there, which I was thinking about too, because yeah, it did really feel like The Fugitive, especially since the climax involves a train basically derailing, which is kind of clever, and it never felt like, you know, okay, this is supposed to be a parody of The Fugitive. It was just like a nice little detail that I'm not sure if it was intentional, but if it was, it was very subtly added in there. So the humor always feels like it's clever, and it's not trying to make like obvious parodies. And it also keeps you engaged, because I do love how Feathers McGraw's heist is never so simplistic. Like, there is like a greater reveal for why he wants to get back at Wallace, and particularly why he wants to break into his house, for, you know, basically to continue his crimes, more or less. And it's pretty clever. It's not like, you know, like a huge twist or like major reveal. But, you know, for a younger audience, it's actually going to be one of those very aha moments. But, you know, it never bores on that angle, just because even though, you know, the grand reveal of what Feathers McGraw's doing might not be that much of a twist, the cleverness throughout of just all the inventions and the funny things that the Norbots do, and Gromit's expressions, and all the funny contraptions in the house that go awry, and the chase sequences that they have are all fun and fast and clever, that, you know, there was never a moment that I was bored with this film. So I guess, like, the real question is, like, you know, where does this film stack among all the Wallace and Gromit films? And I would say it's a little bit in the middle there. I place, like, Were Rabbit at the top, and then obviously, you know, The Wrong Trousers beneath it. And I would say it's a little bit close here, but I think maybe, like, Vengeance Most Foul is right below The Wrong Trousers. But it's very close, just because both of those Wallace and Gromit films are very clever. They're very fast, and they do have, like, a bit of like thriller angles going to it, which are, you know, just making them so much more exciting. So yeah, one more. I doubt this is going to surprise anyone, but yeah, I really did like Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. Not as much as like top tier Wallace and Gromit, but still, you know what you're getting into if you go into these films, and it still has that cleverness, and it doesn't wear out its welcome. And I guess it just proves, you know, that Wallace and Gromit, they can still hold a feature-length film. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what the dog and the man-dog duo do next in their next animated film. So Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul, it premiered on, I think, on like BBC this Christmas, and it should be on Netflix right now. So yeah. Let me read through the chat here. Let's see. Yep, if you like the first, you'll love the second. All right, I'm looking for that. Yeah, you made me say have your trip. It will be on my watch later list, but yeah, if it's as good as the first one, then yeah, I'm all for it. I'm on board. You don't need to try too hard with me. Okay, so all right, we got to get to the best films of 2024. So I was debating a little bit how to do this. I do want to do a video on this, and I think I might do a separate video on just like running through it, because I do have like a script for it. But but for this stream, I think I'm just kind of gonna take it easy and just kind of like casually discuss like my top 10 films of this year. If you'd like to follow along, you can look on my website, movieswithmark.com. I do have my list of the top 10 on there. Also, or if you want a simpler way, you can go to my YouTube page, like on the community tab. It's the first post on there, so you can follow through there. But yeah, I'll just use this time to like kind of casually discuss how 2024 was. So, it obviously this wasn't as big of a year as 2023 was, and I say that only because the top blockbuster films of that year were, like stuff like Oppenheimer and Barbie, like films that were, that would be considered like award-worthy films that did end up getting nominated for Best Picture, and also just films in general that I liked. This year, not so much. Like, what did you have for like the top contenders of the box office? You had Inside Out 2, which I thought was okay. Like, it was very underwhelming compared to the first film. You have Moana 2, which I found even more underwhelming. You had Deadpool and Wolverine, which I did like. I did think was fun, but I found fun in kind of like a roasting of Marvel sort of way, and not for too much else more than that. And then there was also like films like Wicked, which I did enjoy. Wicked was fun, and it'll probably get some bigger nominations. But yeah, outside of that, most of the films I love this year were like a lot of smaller ones. And I think if there's a theme to my favorite films of this year, I think it's mostly just I think it's mostly just like a frustration and anger, I think is what ran through a lot of like my favorite films this year. And it's one of those things that I kind of just realized as I got to the end of the year and I looked at like my top films. It's like, oh yeah, these are all films where characters kind of more or less have a breakdown and are just angry and frustrated with the world. So I guess that's one way to paint 2024, considering all the frustrations we had this year. So yeah, I'll just run through my through my top 10 here. So at number 10, I put an animated film. And this year, in particular, like I said, Inside Out 2 was underwhelming. Moana 2 was underwhelming. So if you were to look at that, you would think that this was a bad year for animation. And it wasn't if you looked in the right places. And what I mean by that, basically, is that if you looked abroad, you would find much better films. Like, we did have a very good film with The Wild Robot. I really did love that cute dream. Well, it's cute, but also a very meaningful DreamWorks film. Very poignant at times. It was a great film. But if you look abroad, there were much better animated films that came out from all the corners of the world. You had you had the Latvian film of Flow, which is about a bunch of animals connecting during a flood. Beautiful visuals. I love the fact that the animals are just animals. If you went over to France, you had a Chicken for Linda, which was a fairly cute, if not meandering, animated film about just a girl who wants chicken for dinner. And it relates to like her late father, but it's mostly just about the madcap humor that happens with acquiring that chicken. And there was also even some decent anime that came out, like it was like Look Inside and the Colors Within, which was a fairly like soft and light fluffy dose of a coming of age drama about starting up a band of all things. Very cute stuff. But my choice for my favorite animated film at number 10 on my list is Memoir of a Snail from Australia. So this is a stop-motion animated film from Adam Elliott, who previously did Mary and Max, and it's that same level of like bittersweet, dramedy, but dialed up to 11. Like, this is very much like Elliott made a fantastic film with Mary and Max, and this film is even better. Because Memoir of a Snail, it's all about Grace Puddle and her problems of just struggling to grow up, where she's separated by her brother, where unfortunate circumstances force them apart, and it makes her relationship suffer. You know, she tries to connect with people, but for every problem she has, there's like a little bit of like joy. It becomes like an emotional roller coaster. Like she connects with an old woman, but then, you know, that old woman dies. She connects with you know, this great guy who she might end up marrying, but then it turns out that he's actually is really an enabler and the worst thing for her health. And through it all, she just has a fascination with snails that just carries her through. And it hooked me from beginning to end. I love like the journey that she goes on and how this film just finds humor in all the right places. It punches you in the gut at just the right moments, and it's not afraid to be adult. Like, this is a film that has a lot of like sex and nudity in it, and is very earnest about it, in very much the same way that Elliot's Miriam Max was earnest about dealing with mental health issues. It's very much in that same vein, and I think what helps the film is that it has like this very grungy, kind of like earthy tone to like its weird little animation style that I think makes it just more relatable and more enticing, because there were a lot of great animated films that were beautiful, especially with like Flo and Chicken for Linda, but I just love a film like this where it's not afraid to look grungy and dirty and weird and cluttered and and just, you know, filthy at times, and just and embrace it with just this kind of like this lovingly bittersweet touch to it all, that really made the film work for me. So yeah, Memoirs of a Snail is my number 10. At number 9 is Furiosa, the Mad Max saga, and what more can I say? Like, George Miller returns to Mad Max again after Fury Road, and he still hasn't lost his touch. You know, it's not just that he returns to this world and gives us more of the stuff we love, like with all the little details of the Immortan Joe characters. You get more of that, more of the convoy chases. You get more of that, more of the weird characters and the tribes that inhabit this world. You get all of that. But what makes Furiosa's film so much more, which I found a little bit more interesting than Fury Road, is that she has more of like a complete arc within this film as kind of more of like an adventure epic. Because it feels like Fury Road and Furiosa are very much different films. The fact that Fury Road is a chase, it's one chase, and it's a damn good chase. But Furiosa is all about her quest for revenge and how it takes place over the course of years, told in various chapters, and actually provides her a very meaningful ending for her journey before she hops in the convoy for the beginning of Fury Road. The way that the film leads up to that point and how she gets her satisfaction and her revenge was unique, and Anya Taylor-Joy has a fantastic performance here. But I just love how we stick with this character, because all the Mad Max films have usually been the same. You know, Max comes onto the scene, he gets his revenge, you know, he might help out some people, but then he wanders off into the desert. And here, Furiosa stays. She stays in this environment. She faces her demons. She liberates those. She is in it for the long haul, and I think that makes her a much more fascinating character to stick with. Especially, you know, if you're going to deviate from Mad Max, you got to have someone more enticing as opposed to just being, you know, a female version of Mad Max. And that very much isn't what Furiosa is, and that's what makes this film so much more different than Fury Road, and so much more exciting for what it's willing to explore with this material. Also, Chris Hemsworth as the villain here is having a ball. Like, there was never, especially for a film where you have Immortan Joe back here. He's not played by the same actor since he's died since, but even with having Immortan Joe in this film, I still looked forward to Chris Hemsworth villain in here, just because he's given just enough of a backstory to find him intriguing, but it's never treated as enough as pathos where you're sympathetic to him. He's very much a vile villain who has become almost like nihilistic to the point where he expects revenge, and it makes him so much more sinister and just so eccentric and fascinating to watch as he combats with Furiosa and everything from like shootouts at a crumbling power plant to just drag out chases through the desert. It's just fantastic dynamic between the two. George Miller's direction is still on point. It's still a fun Mad Max film. Miller still has it. And at number 8 is the cheapest film of the year and also one of the funniest films of the year, and it's Hundreds of Beavers. The plot of this film is very simple. It's one dude who wants to win this woman's hand in marriage, but her father will not give this girl up unless this dude can bring him the pelts of hundreds of beavers. And that's all you need for like this zany film, which is all about this one dude killing hundreds of beavers in the woods with just a whole series of Looney Tunes gags. And I know that like this term gets used a lot. A lot of people will describe a film as like a live action Looney Tunes film. But I think if any live action film was more worthy of that title, it's Hundreds of Beavers. Just for having the absurdity of like all the beavers like looking like football mascots with like the fur suits and the giant eyes, and even like when they're gutted, like they have like all this like felt guts and organs that spill out all over the place. It's all just so ridiculous and absurd. And much like Mad Max Fury Road, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to complain about this film and say, there isn't really much of a story. It's just like a series of, slapstick, Looney Tunes gags of him killing all these beavers in this darkly comedic way. And it's like, yeah, that's all the film is. And it's hilarious. Much like how Fury Road is a fantastic chase from beginning to end, this whole slaughter of beavers in this darkly comedic fashion never bored. And you would think it would, because it's just kill after kill after kill. But every level of like decapitation and trapping and murdering and accidents and wilderness explosions that unfold, it just keeps getting more clever as the film goes along. Like, it never bored me. And it was just so fascinating that this little independent film could be this uproarious and make me just like laugh so much. This is easily one of the funniest films of the year. There's so much more I can say about Hundreds of Beavers than that. It just made me laugh and laugh and laugh. And that's the best way you can describe a comedy. So at number 7 is the best horror film of the year, and that's Nosferatu, the remake from Robert Eggers. And I expected Eggers to do a good job of this material, given like his past work on other films like The Northman and The Witch and The Lighthouse. But Nosferatu I found more fascinating from just like the way that Eggers edits the film and the way that he taps into like a deeper element of like how evil is perceived and how it resonates through like these various like psychosexual angles within this gothic horror setting. Because like it never makes like Count Orlok by Bill Skarsgård. It never makes him like this simplistic villain who has like this one drive. Like they establish him as just like this terrifying evil force that you don't see for most of the film. He's mostly concealed in shadows, and then he slowly starts coming out more and more as you get characters talking about him as like this great evil force. There's so many unforgettable scenes here. I love the way that the film transitions to making this feel like a nightmare, like when Thomas Hutter first approaches Orlok's castle, the way that it just kind of like fades in and out and just kind of like feels like you're going deeper and deeper into like the depths of hell to like meet with Orlok, and just tapping into like these deepest, darkest fears of these characters, and just like, realizing this is like a force that you almost can't defeat. It drew me in so much, and I found the film so fascinating for never relenting on it. And it just, and above all else, it just felt like a terrifying film. It's a very scary film. It's not like roller coaster scary, like, with like a Blumhouse type film. It's not even like campy scary. It's not even like, like social horror type of scary. It's just plain terrifying for, these characters approaching this sinister force that they don't think they can stop. And it's delightfully scary. I love the way that it taps into just all like the darkest fears of humanity, and it doesn't relent. And it's also just beautiful and just a fantastic cast overall. And another fantastic cast was in my number 6 pick is Dune Part 2, Denis Villeneuve finishing off the first Dune novel, and he does not disappoint. He does very much what I expected him to do, but also a little bit more. And I think that's what makes me love part 2 a little bit more than part 1, is just that Villeneuve recognizes, the aspects of this adaptation where he does have to kind of like retool and trim, but also keeps the thematic focus firm on Paul's ascent to power, not being one that's fully aspirational, but one that's cautious and questioned. And I think it's beautifully explored by the way we get to focus more on Chani, played by Zendaya, who questions how Paul Atreides, once more played by Timothée Chalamet, is rising to power and using all of the faith of the Fremen to kind of like build himself back up to becoming this messiah of Arrakis. And the way that it proceeds, like, it's exciting. It's got some grand moments of, him riding the sandworm, of course. That's a crucial moment you have to get right, especially since there isn't a lot of it described in the book. It's mostly like you have to go off your own imagination. And Villeneuve does not disappoint in that department. Great cast as well, for bringing like Christopher Walken and Florence Pugh into this, for the few times that they're on screen, they dominate. And it's just, it takes everything that I loved about the novel and just, pumps it up with a greater emphasis on what needs to be explored and understood from the book, which makes it so much better as it makes it as both like a faithful adaptation and an adaptation where Villeneuve is willing to put his own mark on it. So we're not just getting a straight transition, from the book to the screen. We're actually getting, someone who understands the material and wants to say something more about it, as opposed to just, going off the text verbatim. If Villeneuve did that, it would still be a pretty good film, but the fact that he can find something deeper to explore and still make it look cinematic is just fantastic. So yeah, it's everything I wanted to see in a Dune film, and I think Villeneuve has confirmed, with this film, that he has made the best adaptation of Frank Herbert's original novel. And at number 5, we have Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. And I was debating between Challengers and Guadagnino's other film, Queer, this year. But, Challengers is just, it's so exciting. Like Queer was really great as kind of like a slow burn, surreal romance. But Challengers as kind of like this intense battle of like sex and tennis and ambition. It just locked me in. I love the way that it proceeds. I love the performances here from Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist, who are both competing over Zendaya because they think they are competing for sex here, when in truth Zendaya is competing for tennis. She doesn't really love either of these guys. She just wants to see a great match out of both of them. And as the film goes along, it becomes more about her just wanting to force these two guys to basically just kiss already, to, relieve the sexual tension there, because you can see it everywhere in this film. And I guess like that's the best way to describe the film. It's just intense. Everything from like the tennis match that frames the entire film is incredibly shot, from like the close-ups to like the POV of the ball, to just zooming in on Zendaya when the ball bats back and forth, and just the way it's cut really quickly and excitedly. And even just like Reznor and Ross's score is fantastic here, because it feels like another character in the room. Like at one point, O'Connor and Feist are like they're in a sauna, and there's sexual tension between them. But then in comes the Reznor Ross soundtrack, which amps up more and more and more. It's like, is the soundtrack another like part of this love affair that we need to get? Because it really does feel like, like the music is fighting to get in on this sexual tension too. And just for being that intense and exciting, and also just absurd enough and hilarious in certain scenes, for finding just the right moments of humor in between the dramatic intensity of everything here, is just such a fantastic balancing act that I love the way that Guadagnino assembles this film, and I think it for sure is going to be one of my favorites of the director for many years. It depends. I don't know. I'll have to wait to see what Guadagnino does next, but yeah, Challengers is just, I had a ball with this film. To put it one way. That's one way of putting it. All right. So at number 4 is Nickel Boys, which told the story of two boys who were at a Florida reform school in the 1960s, in which they experienced the worst of racism during that era. Now, this type of film could feel like it was like a trauma dump. From, like there have been so many films like this which have focused on like the trauma that comes with historic racism. But what I love so much about Nickel Boys is that it doesn't just focus on that aspect. Like, I mean, like, for one, though, I do love the way that the film is shot. The film, when we're at the reform school, it's entirely from the POV of these two characters. And I mean that literally. We see everything that they see, like when the kid arrives, when the first character we follow arrives at this reform school, we sit with him in the car. We have that uncomfortable realization that, when they take the other kids out of the car, that he's not going to be taken to the better part of this school. He's going to be taken to the worst part, and that he's going to be stuck there, and there's going to be no way for him out of this. And then later, when he meets another character that he connects with, we see his POV as well. But in addition to that, the film is also non-linear, because then it jumps ahead in time, where we get a third-person view of one of the survivors of the school, and just trying to deal with his past and kind of like try to, uncover the details of what went wrong in that history. And then we get another perspective that's almost kind of like a scattershot, like documentary approach of just showing us the evidence of everything that's uncovered from this reform school, and just thinking about everything that surrounded it, and everything that made these characters over this course of time. In addition to that, it's just beautifully assembled with like the music, to the point where there are certain points in the film where it just like takes a detour to the stars, and almost kind of like has like this almost little bit of like a Terrence Malick thing going on, where it feels like we're trying to get a better sense of just like life itself, as opposed to just focusing on like this narrow view of history and like the trauma that comes with that 1960s racism, which the film does focus on, and is beautifully it unfolds like beautifully. Like, you feel the anger and the frustration, and just like even like little moments of just realizing that there's you're constantly on the defense in this scenario. Like the way that that the characters slowly realize that even though they try to have appeals, they just go on deaf ears, and it gets to a point where like something as simple as just like the cutting of the cake becomes like almost like nostalgic, and feels like it's saying something more for especially like, I mean, obviously with like the context that it happens within, because it feels like the last slice of cake that's going to be eaten before this kid goes off to reform school. But just like the close-ups of it, and just focusing on those little moments, and how the soundtrack plays off it as well, it feels like this all-encompassing film, not just about historic racism and just like the lingering trauma of the past, but just life in general, with the way that it's set up here. And it's just like, it's a fantastic it's a fantastic assembly here, that it feels like it could have just been like a simplistic drama, and it never does. It always feels like it's trying to say something much more grand, and always nails it in just the right ways with like this nonlinear storytelling. So yeah, Nickel Boys is something else. Like, it was one of those films where I watched it and I felt like, like almost like I was like transported to another place. Like I was taken out of my body while I was watching this film. And I'm not just saying that just because like, you're literally in the body of another character for this. And like, there are scenes where you're just taking trips to the stars. Like, you're thrown all around the place. But hey, that's the great appeal about movies, is you can place yourself in someone else's shoes, and Nickel Boys is one of the best examples of trying to feel that empathy. And at number 3, we have The Brutalist. This is a towering American epic about a Hungarian Jewish immigrant, Laszlo Toth, played by Adrian Brody, who quickly realizes that America, that American dream you're fighting for is not going to be easy, and it's going to be met with a lot of bigotry and greed, and so many aspects that are going to pin you down and hold you down, possibly for the rest of your life. Now, I was expecting this film to be good, but I wasn't expecting it to explore so much. And I mean, like, I did expect Brody's performance to be really good, and it is. But the way that Brady Corbet directs this film is just like it's beautiful and grotesque at the same time. For one, I love like the big structure that Toth is building throughout this film. Like, he's tasked with building this community center that's going to have some representation of faith within it, which is going to be like his magnum opus. But every frustration that he endures along the way makes building this grand epic that much more troublesome, and he faces all these problems of anti-Semitism and bigotry and the issues of capitalism and power dynamics, and how like his family is mistreated and his drug addiction and the problems with his family being taken advantage of, and just all of these compounding factors that just makes him boil over with frustration, and you feel it in every scene here. I especially love the way that the music complements off this film too as well. Like, when you start listening to the music, it feels like it's building to something, in much in the way that like Toth is building this community center, but then it always goes like a little bit off key, where you can like almost, where it feels like you're building something, and then you start seeing the cracks in the foundation, and you start seeing pieces of it fall off, and that struggle to patch it all back together, and just that frustration of realizing when parts of it fall down, you got to build it back up again, and you got to keep fighting, and it has to keep going longer and longer and longer, which is why I feel like the 3.5 hours that this film runs for is perfectly warranted, because you feel every single pressure that Toth has. Like, you feel him get kicked down, and then he gets like another chance, but then gets kicked again. It always feels like he's taking one step up the ladder and then 2 steps down, and just getting like, he just explodes at one point with anger at his wife about how, like when he was in Hungary, like he was a revered architect, and here in America, his talents are just squandered over everything. There are moments of great beauty in this film, as when Toth visits this quarry of this stone that he's going to use in the building. It's just a wondrous, amazing sight. It's just as beautiful as like when you do see the actual community center being built. But then you transition from like that quarry scene to a scene of him drinking with Harrison, the guy who commissioned him, who is played by Guy Pearce, and Harrison just flat out rapes him. And it is horrifying and shocking, and he doesn't answer for it. He just says that, I can do this, I have this power, and, I hate the fact that you have this ability, and I'm going to take advantage of you. He doesn't say that exactly, but it's very much implied, and the fallout that happens after that, with how he's approached, and how basically Harrison doesn't answer for this atrocity that he's committed. It feels very, very somber, but also there's a little bit of like a sobering element to it as well. Like, it's just fantastic drama, and it's so intricately well built that I almost had to I had to look this up. Like, is this based on somebody or some place or some event? And no, it's not. This is an entirely original historical drama by Brady Corbet, and it's mesmerizing. Like, I could not stop thinking about this film. And at number 2, we have the film Sing Sing. This is the film about the rehabilitation through the arts program at the Sing Sing maximum security prison. Now, there's a lot to love about this film. Like, aside from the fact that that this program actually does exist, and not only does it exist, but people who have engaged in this program actually do appear in this film, playing themselves, which I found just amazing. And the fact that they're allowed to inhabit the spotlight for a bit was actually pretty cool. Now, on a technical level, yeah, that's cool, and that's great with that relation to reality. But I think what makes the film even better is having Coleman Domingo in this fantastic performance as Divine G, who's part of the program as one of like the most cultured members of the program. Like, he's familiar with plays and scripts, and he can also like pen original scripts of his own. But he's also a little bit cautious about wanting to, to put himself out there, and has his doubts, especially with how like his appeals are denied, and how he feels like he's trapped and dealing with like the death of inmates. Is just it's too much to bear for him. But he also has like a good eye for casting, because then he takes an interest in this other inmate called Divine Eye, who's actually played by the real life person who goes by this name of Clarence Macklin, and he realized that, you know, Divine Eye, he can see there's something with this guy, because even though he's not that good of an actor, like, he needs a lot of work when they start rehearsing for this play they're going to put on in prison. But the fact that this guy picked up King Lear when talking about like the play, like, Divine G is like, there's something to this guy. This guy picked up King Lear and decided to read it. I think maybe we can mold him. And just watching Divine Eye kind of, you know, slowly get more into the role was great. But while at the same time watching Divine G also kind of crumble, and the two men rely on each other. Because there's a lot to love in this film. There's good drama. There's great acting, especially from like the real life people who have been in like this type of program here. But just the connection between men, and the way that they kind of like try to support each other and reveal more about themselves and show like the vulnerable side of themselves in a way that feels natural and not mocking, but also not melodramatic. It just has this refreshing level of like sincere realism to it, that I think perfectly plays off like the real life program that they do reference in the film. Especially when you have like Paul Rossi, who comes in as the coordinator for this play, and he just, you know, Paul Rossi, he was from Sound of Metal too. He plays a similar role here of just coming into the room and bringing everyone together, and just, you know, having this easygoing nature of just getting everyone comfortable enough to open up in a way that is believable. That, you know, like, yeah, like, 'cause even if you were skeptical, you would sit down with this guy, and after a while, you would start opening up to him with how easy and how like gentle, but also earnest and a little bit tough he is with these guys. That the connection that these characters have is just so strong, and I found that fascinating, because there are a few films that I've seen in the past few years that have just such a strong male friendship connection that is not played up so much as a joke or as melodrama. And here, the connection is so strong, and just all that revealing nature, and the vulnerabilities, and all the frustrations, and the honesty that comes from these characters. It's just so beautiful and so profound. And you know, I was reading this study that said that Gen Z wants to see more platonic relationships within films. Like, they would like to see more of those relationships in movies. And if that's the case, I would say go straight to Sing Sing. This is like exhibit A I would use of forming a strong platonic bond between these characters. Because like it tends to happen where like there is a strong enough male bond where you're almost thinking like, oh, are these characters gonna kiss? Is there like homoerotic tension going on between them? And this film, it doesn't really feel like it. Feels like it very much is a solid foundational platonic friendship, which I think is a little bit of like of a trickier route to navigate without just kind of like stumbling into like, you know, like it's too melodramatic, it's trying to be like too, you know, vulnerable with these characters, or going too high where like it becomes to a point where just like, well, you two just like kiss already. And there never is that moment. It always feels like it's men at their lowest trying to connect with each other, and they just have a strong bond that it made me love the film so much. It has such a huge heart. Okay, so at number 1 on my list, and there was a lot to go through this year, but my number sorry, I gotta get some water for this last one here. All right, here we go. All right, so my number 1 pick for the year is Sean Baker's Anora. And I usually love Sean Baker's films, and I expected to love Anora, but not to the degree that Sean Baker stages this film, mostly because like it felt like an unpredictable film, but also a gorgeous film. and just a film with fire inside it, just because of Mikey Madsen's performance here as Annie, as this stripper who tries to, you know, get in good with like this rich Russian guy and marries him, only for her, only to be placed in the worst situation, where the Russian kid's family comes to force this marriage to be annulled, but the Russian dude runs off, and so Annie now has to be drug around New York with these Russian goons trying to find this guy and get the marriage annulled. And it would feel like, you know, Mikey's at her worst here, but it always feels like she's in control. Like, even when, like, she's being forced to do everything here, she is just bitter and angry and controls the situation. And if she can't, like, attack, like, physically, she'll attack verbally. And there is never a moment where you're not rooting for her. You're just like, yes, you know, she's just trying to struggle to get by, to get some money, to negotiate her way into having like a comfortable life. And she will fight for it. She will fight so hard here. And Madsen's performance just feels so real for this scenario, because like if you were in this situation too, you'd be frustrated and angry and want to like just shout back and fight back against, like, you know, like these people who are basically like rich doofuses who have no idea what they're doing, who are just such idiots, and they need to be called out. And Annie never wastes a moment to humiliate these people, to just call them out, to roll her eyes at them, to just look down on them because they deserve to be looked down upon, where even if they do get what they want in the end, Annie always feels like she's still fighting, like she still has the upper hand, like she still gets in the last word. She is just fighting back against what seems like, you know, like the most towering forces in her life that she has no hope of conquering. And you feel for her, you love her fighting, and it's just Madsen's performance is here, just like, it is so intoxicating. I couldn't get enough of her, especially the way that she subverts this. There's a moment set up where it feels like she's going to have a romantic connection with one of the goons, and she just shoots it down. In fact, she shoots it down multiple times, you know, proving that, no, I am not going to be so simplistic and find some, you know, silver lining here. This situation sucks, and I'm going to tell you that it sucks, and I'm going to call it out that it sucks, and I'm going to fight back any chance I get in this film. And that's why I loved Honora so much. I loved how it just kept getting more twisty and absurd, and like you feel for her, it's very somber, but it's also just flat out hilarious at times. Not to mention, Sean Baker shot this film in 35mm, and the way that he shoots New York, and even like Las Vegas, is just amazing, just fantastically gorgeous, and like he gets almost this very like retro quality out of it. So yeah, it's an amazing film to look at, and it's a fantastic film to follow, and just the performance by Mikey Madsen is the reason to watch, and she dominates this film. I couldn't get enough of this movie, and I felt like everything that it embodied with like her fury and her frustration, I felt just made it the perfect film from 2024. So there you go. That's my list of the top films of 2024. Oh, and quick little honorable mentions here, because this was a tough year for trying to assemble a top 10, because I could easily do a top 20, because here are a few other honorable mentions from this year. The People's Joker, Love Lies Bleeding, Kinds of Kindness, the new Yorgos Lanthimos film, Queer, I did mention with Luca Guadagnino, Small Things Like These, which is a quiet but somber drama about the how do I put this? The insidious nature of like the Catholic Church in a small town. Great performance by Cillian Murphy there, one of my favorites of his. Flow, I mentioned. Rebel Ridge, fantastic action film from James Saulnier. The Seed of the Sacred Fig, great film about attacking Tehran's theocracy and how it brutalizes women and doesn't answer for those crimes. Great film, must watch. Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat was my favorite documentary of last year, and I didn't expect it to be, because I thought it was just going to be like a routine documentary about how the Republic of Congo was dismantled and targeted by the UN, which was an important film, but having it framed almost kind of like as a music video with great typography and just like great editing. It ingrains you in that struggle, makes you care about it. Fantastic film. Also, Opus, the last film of Sakaguchi, great composer. Kneecap was a great Irish rap biopic. Fantastic movie. Definitely one of my favorite international films of the past year. Daughters, I would say, is a great documentary double feature to have with Sing Sing, because while Sing Sing was about rehabilitation through a play, Daughters is all about a father-daughter dance to help incarcerated men reconnect with their daughters. A great double feature there. So if you do watch Sing Sing and you want something similar to watch after it that relates more to reality, watch Daughters. It's a great documentary. And another great documentary to recommend is The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, which tells the story of a World of Warcraft player who had such an impact on a community that when he died, the players of the game came together to show their support. And it's beautifully communicated by portraying the events through a recreation of the game environment, which I thought was a little bit of a gamble, but it made the film work and it made it so much more poignant. So there you go. Those were the top 10 films of this year. And if you want to, I'll do a quick rundown here for those who might have missed it here. At number 10, I had Memoirs of a Snail. Number 9, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. Number 8, Hundreds of Beavers. Number 7, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. At number 6, Dune Part 2. Number 5, Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. Number 4, Nickel Boys. Number 3, The Brutalist. At number 2, Sing Sing. And at number 1, Anora. So there you go. Top 10 films of that year. So I recapped that, so let's also recap the films I reviewed today. So I reviewed A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan film from James Mangold. It locks it in a little bit of a box here, I think, for Bob Dylan's life, but for focusing on just that moment in the 1960s with him and his rise to fame, I think Mangold focuses on what matters, and Timothée Chalamet's performance is what makes the film and makes it such a good biopic just to watch for the performances alone. So very good film. I also reviewed The Fire Inside, the story of Clarissa T-Rex, the first woman boxer to take the world by storm. It's a great sports biopic, mostly because it focuses on what happens after the Olympic win, which I did not expect this film to do, and it has a fantastic performance here by everyone, especially Brian Tyree Henry, but also worth noting for the performance of Ryan Destiny, who does a great job, and also a fantastic directorial debut by Rachel Morrison and a screenplay by Barry Jenkins. Keep an eye on this director. Well, Barry Jenkins, obviously, but Rachel Morrison as well. And then, of course, I reviewed Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul. A pretty fun follow-up to The Wrong Trousers for a film from, I think it's almost like 3 decades ago that film came out. But yeah, for being such a long-awaited sequel, it's another fantastic Aardman animation, and it just proves that Wallace and Gromit can do no wrong. It still has enough cleverness and funny slapstick physical bits here to warrant a feature-length special. So, yeah, there were no stinkers this week. I actually kind of dug all of these films, but I would say, you know, Wallace and Gromit is on Netflix right now, so if you are going to go out to the theater, A Complete Unknown is really good, but I would actually recommend The Fire Inside just a little bit more, only just because it's a sports biopic that I didn't expect to be rooting for, mostly because of the great performances and the better questioning of that rise to fame that you don't see in as many sports films. So yeah, lots of good stuff to watch there. All right. So, if you'd like to read reviews of the stuff, and you'd like to see my top 10 list, you can go to movieswithmark.com, where I do have other reviews of films from this year. And as we get into Oscar season, I'll also be talking a little bit more about those films as well. So, coming up this month, I will be reviewing some of the new films coming out, specifically Den of Thieves 2 and Dogman. We'll see how those films do. I'm not, incredibly hopeful for them, but I'm cautiously optimistic. But also, there's a lot of other films that I watched during award season which have not come out yet, and they're actually going to be coming out in January. So I'm going to be talking about those a little bit more as they come up here. In particular, I will talk about Better Man, which is a musical biopic on Robbie Williams, except Robbie Williams is a monkey. I'll explain more about that later. I'll also talk about a few other films. Like another film I wanted to talk about was Mike Leigh's film Hard Times, which is a little bit of like a throwback to some of the director's kind of like classic melodramas, and I have a lot to say about that as well. There's also a few other films expanding that I'll be talking a little bit more about, but yeah. If you want to stay informed on those films, as well as the upcoming films that we got for 2025, be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep up to date on the latest movies. So, I can feel my voice starting to go. So, let me just read through the comments here before I knock off here. Hannibal Grimm says, have you seen There's Something in the Barn? It's been out a while. I have not. I've heard of it, but I have not looked. I haven't heard from anyone else who's seen it yet, so I'll put it on my watch list. So let's see. Yeah, it was hard this year. It really was. Love the animation of Flow. Yep, beautiful, beautiful animation. Let's see. We have both Fury Road and Furiosa coming up this month. After watching Nosferatu, I want a buddy comedy with Dafoe and Innocent. They really did play off each other well in that film. And not in like the ways I expected to. Just their characters in general were a lot of fun to watch in Nosferatu, yeah. So that was a wonderful film. So yeah, stay tuned to this channel for this year. I've got some plans here. There are some video essays that I have planned that I want to, that I've been debating on going over with like some scripts. So there are a few that I were going to do, but then I shelved because I didn't think they were quite good enough. And the more I thought about them, I realized I kind of want to have a little bit of like a paradigm shift with the topics I want to cover. So that'll be coming up more. I'll explain more about that in a longer video coming up later this year. But yeah, lots more reviews coming down, so be sure to check all the websites I have here. Be sure to stay tuned on my Patreon. I'm getting close to finishing my book on Saturday morning cartoons, so if you want to keep up to date on that, you can go over to my Patreon and subscribe to read the latest chapters that I finished. We're getting close to the end here, and once I get to the end, the patrons will be getting a physical copy of that book. It's coming. It's been a long time coming, but I can see the finish line. I'm getting there. So I'll eventually finish it this year. And yeah, so stay tuned for more movie reviews coming up in 2025. We've got a lot more to cover, especially after everything I covered this year. I'm just going to hop right back into it. So, yep. Yeah, stay tuned for about 1 to 2 weeks. I'll be back with more reviews. So until then, have a good one, everybody. Have a great year.